Hello, I'm Calvin Morris and this is my review of Doctor Who Series 8, Episode 5, Time Heist. So, Time Heist. What can I say about this episode? Well, it started off well. It was a really good start. They hooked people in early by having a jump cut to a different scene, in that it starts off in Clara's apartment and then jumps to what appears to be a secure room facility where they're being chased down by some security teams. Now, this plot centres around the fact that there's an unknown assailant that's hired them to rob the Bank of Karabraxos, the most secure bank in the galaxy. But this actual scene, right at the start, I found totally confusing. Totally confusing. Not because I didn't know what was going on or anything like that. I followed it to its conclusion. But I have watched this scene like 5 times over and I still cannot work out, were they already inside the bank when the security team caught up with them? Or were they in a secure room outside the bank and they'd been determined that these people were going to rob the bank and therefore the security team was chasing after them? I don't know. Like I said, I've watched it like 5 times, because what happens is that they're in the room, which appears to be a room inside the bank, and then it cuts to them being outside the bank going into the bank. Now, I can't make head nor tail of this. Like I said, I've watched it like 5 times, still don't know what's going on. Let's talk about the plot of the episode first before we get into some specifics. The plot of the episode is very much Doctor Who meets Ocean's 11. He has a team of people who are there to rob the bank. Sai, who is a cyborg human, and Saber, who is a mutant human. There's a lot of stylish stuff going on at the start. There's a lot of interesting wipes and interesting crossfades that don't follow through right the way throughout the episode. They kind of peter out as the episode goes on. This episode was intended to be a fun romp and going in a different direction to last week's episode. And I can totally understand that. You want to keep things fresh, you want to keep things new and different, so you change direction. You don't do what you've done the week before, you go on a complete departure. But the problems I have with this episode are that the overall plot was really, really, really fun and interesting until about halfway through the episode. In fact, it was probably the last 10 minutes of this episode that really let it down. What let it down more than anything else was its conclusion. And because it was a really unsatisfying conclusion, but I'll get around to that later. What I could say about what went on in the episode, such as the way that they punished somebody who was intending to rob the bank, was that it was brutal. That whole thing where the skull compresses in, wow, that's a brutal death. That was nasty. That was really, really nasty. I liked it, but it was nasty. Sticky, sticky wicket. I liked the monster, the Teller. I thought that was a really, really good creation. A really interesting looking creature. Liked Miss Delphox. The casting of Miss Delphox I thought was good. I liked her office, and it was such a sterile environment and everything was sort of big squares and blocks and leaning square pillars. I thought that the office could have been a little bit bigger. If they'd made it like sort of 5 times the size and gone really down the Bond baddie route, it would have probably been a bit more impressive. There's not a lot really to say about this episode. There was some clever writing going on in the way that it was composed. There was some clever editing in places, but like I said, there's a scene in there I don't get and I don't understand, and I probably never will. So the photography wasn't anything special. It was kind of shoot for what it says in the script. There was nothing really creative going on. There was a lot of times when the actors were chewing the scenery. No, I said that the conclusion of the episode really let it down. What let it down more than anything else was the fact that the subplot in this episode was already done. We've already seen it. The monster chasing them around the building, and it turns out that it's only doing it because it's got a loved one that's trapped. We saw this last series in the episode Hide. It's exactly the same plot. It's not even like the same plot, it's exactly the same plot. In fact, the fact that the Doctor frees them both and they both go off to live happily ever after, it's a direct clone. There's nothing new, fresh or different about that at all. Not only that, but his assistant at the time was Clara, so she's seen it before as well. And yeah, I mean, there's good stuff in this episode. There's good stuff, but things, they don't go far enough. For example, they run in and out of corridors, and the corridors seem kind of short and don't go off into the distance. You'd expect this giant bank to sort of have massive, huge corridors that disappear into the perspective, but they don't. You can see the back wall. There's elements whereby they are inside the bowels of the bank, but it doesn't look like the bowels of any bank you'd ever think of. Or, you know, it could have been the boiler room at BBC and nobody would have been able to tell the difference. So the other thing was the fact that for the most secure bank in the galaxy, there seemed to be a lack of guards, and particularly on the internal side of the bank, where there's the bank vault, you'd expect at least 2 guards to be standing outside. It has the biggest air vents I have ever seen, and I'm not sure, you know, why you'd need air vents that big for small little rooms. It was just a way of getting in and out. But I mean, I have no problem with them having large air vents, but they could have at least every once in a while put like a laser grid across so that somebody would have to turn off the grid to get through. There was stuff in this episode that was really, really interesting and really fun stuff. But again, it all falls down. The fact that the assailant behind everything, the architect, turned out to be the Doctor, I thought was a cop-out. And like I said, the Miss Karabraxos at the end, it was all just a letdown. It all went up and up and up and up and up, and then bang, come down with a crashing thump. The Doctor points out that, you know, robbing a bank is easy if you've got a TARDIS. So why didn't he use the TARDIS? And some people are going to say, oh, he does say in the episode that he couldn't rob the bank with using the TARDIS because of the solar storm, which would make things impossible to navigate. That's true. Might I remind you also that the TARDIS can travel in time, and therefore he could have robbed the bank the day before. It wouldn't have made any difference. Miss Karabraxos would have still had to have left due to the solar storm, and she'd have still had regrets later on in life, and the Doctor could have just as easily have left her a note saying, you're going to need this. He didn't force her into that situation. He didn't try to change her mind or anything. He just gave her a note, and the note wouldn't have changed over the course of time. So, really and truly, the explanations in this episode as to why this episode had to happen, they were pretty weak. Aside from the fact that the Doctor just wanted to go on a fun romp, that's pretty much the only explanation I can find. It's not a great episode. Again, it has good ideas, but the good ideas don't pan out, and it has broken logic, which is difficult to fix. It's not a fantastic episode. It started off really, really well, but it just went off on a tangent that was just completely filled with disappointment. So, what can I say overall about this episode? Well, it tried hard, but ultimately it didn't do very well. And this episode is about a 5 out of 10. I wish I could give it more, but there's so much they could have done with the look and the style and the way it was photographed and how they presented it to us. And I think this episode was trying to be a little bit too clever for its own good. And I think that was his ultimate undoing. And the fact that it didn't present us with anything or any sort of mystery or intrigue, it was very, very tepid. Like I said, good start, bad finish. So 5 out of 10, and that's my review of Doctor Who.